Hello and welcome to Atomic Facepalm. This is Chris, and today it's how to assemble your models the right way, you big old drangus, you. Okay, before we start, I want to highlight that you can apply these steps to any brand of model or system. This is not exclusive to Warhammer stuff. Now, onward to the building. Step 1, tools. You need tools. You can't put models together with psychic powers. Trust me, I've tried. You'll suffer perils of the warp immediately. I lost my first house to that mishap. Anyway, these are the minimum tools you want, by the way. I'll recommend a few others after we go over the basics. So here's what we have. A tiny drill, mainly used for drilling, shocking. But really it's for gun barrels. You can also use it for pinning models to cork. That's more of like a painting technique though, so I won't cover that in this video, maybe a later one. Hobby knife. It doesn't need to be an absurdly sharp katana. In fact, it's kind of better if it isn't. You'll see why in a bit. Any hobby knife will do here, even like a basic retractable one. Please don't cut yourself. Side note, you'll probably cut yourself. Happens to the best of us. A mold line remover. This one is kind of optional. It's used to get rid of those ugly, pronounced injection molding lines on plastic models, but to save some cash, you can always use the dull side of your hobby knife instead. Side cutters. The ones I have are Citadel brand, or if you're like new to 40k, that means they're from Games Workshop. The Citadel cutters are outrageously expensive, but I absolutely adore them. They're heavy, they're sturdy, and they stay sharp. If you want to save some money though, you can just get the ones from someone like the Army Painter. They work just fine. Step 2. Glue. Look, I've already said you can't use psychic powers to stick your models together. Or can you? Okay, you probably can't. So get some glue. Brands don't really matter here. I do recommend getting all three types you see on the screen though. For example, super glue. Great for plastic and resin models. Despite the super part of the name, it's actually pretty easy to pop the parts on and off a model after you use it, but that can actually be a good thing. For example, maybe you'd like to go back and magnetize some old models, or maybe you'd like to change their war gear. Superglue helps with that because it's not permanent, and over time it actually is pretty easy to pop those suckers off. Superglue also dries pretty fast, which is helpful. A little note here, if you've never used superglue before, please be very careful. It annoyingly is powerful on human skin. You can glue your fingers together pretty easily, and never, ever, ever touch your eyes or face when working with this stuff. That's no joke. It can cause serious damage. Plastic glue. Awesome for plastic models only. It is absolutely useless on resin. But it is a bit unforgiving for newbies. That's because plastic glue quite literally melts the plastic into itself via a chemical bond. So if you ever want to, let's say, remove the model from its original base, put it on a new base, you're in for a rough time. You'd probably have to cut the feet off. It also takes much longer to set, so you have to hold the model parts together for a much longer time than compared to superglue. PVA glue, which stands for polyvinyl acetate. In America, it's just called Elmer's glue, even when it's not Elmer's. It's because Americans are smart, you see. Mainly used for sticking sand and other stuff to your model's bases, but really it's an all-around glue. Cutters and cutting things. All right, grab those plastic cutters. Stop, wait. Don't cut anything yet. Take a closer look at them. See how one side is a diagonal inward-facing angle and the other side is flat? Yeah, you're going to want to use the flat side against the pieces you're removing, so the diagonal faces the sprue, itself. This makes for a smoother surface on the model, and you won't have to clean up as many ugly, pointy, stabby remains from the sprue that are left on the model. So here we go. Take your time and try to be as precise as you can. Pays off. To truly replicate my own experience here, be sure to drop the piece you've just removed onto the floor, which is covered in dog hair and terrifying spiders. Spend 15 minutes trying to find it. Welcome to model building. Remember, only cut out the pieces the instructions tell you to. Clean up. No matter what, some tiny little sprue bits are going to be left on that part that you just cut out of the sprue. Use a hobby knife and gently, emphasis on gently, scrape and cut them off. Careful here, you don't want to cut too deep into the model's surface, unless you're like planning on painting some gunshot or shrapnel wounds or something later on. Flexible sandpaper sticks are kind of helpful, but alas, I don't have any. If you Google the term flexible sandpaper sticks, they're worth getting. You can bend them around small little areas in your model and sand away those rough bits that the hobby knife and mold line remover has trouble reaching. Mold lines. You might be tempted to skip this step. Don't. I used to skip it when I was new, admittedly, and I now hate myself for it. Bad Chris. No donut. Mold lines will show up when you paint the model, and they're awful. Save yourself the pain. Typically, they're easy to find, though. They're like long, thin lines that go up and down the center of the pieces when you cut them out. You can angle your mold line remover if you have it, or again, you can use the dull end or the back end of a hobby knife. Just apply a tiny bit of pressure and then start dragging the tool up and down the lines. Dry fit. It's a dry fit. Another rookie mistake is just slapping some glue in the parts, jamming them together, only to realize they don't fit at all. It's not fun. Instead, take the pieces and make sure they line up and match before adding the glue. It only takes a few seconds to dry fit your models, and it will save you some serious aggravation. It's drilling time. This is a completely optional step, and it might not apply to every model, mostly if your models have gun barrels or exhaust pipes. It is a pretty awesome thing to do, though. Guns and exhausts just look kind of weird if they don't have holes. I recommend that you don't use a gigantic cordless power drill. That's serious overkill and you could hurt yourself. Instead, grab a hobby drill from Games Workshop or the Army Painter, or you can use a Dremel or really just any tiny palm drill you can find. I like to take a hobby knife, and what I do is I use the point of it and make a little teeny bitty starting hole in the barrel. Please be very careful if you do this. It is incredibly easy to slip and cut your thumb open. I may have done that before. The pain was exquisite. Dark Eldar would have been proud. After making a tiny set point, I then take a drill bit and I check the size against the barrel or pipe. You don't want it to be so big that it takes out the whole barrel. You want it to be smaller than that. So just kind of do a quick gander and then slowly start drilling. Slower is better. You don't need to go too deep either. Once you're happy with the depth, make sure to clean up any loose bits that came out from the drill. After that, you can, if you want, take your hobby knife and kind of gently twirl it inside the barrel to sort of flush the edges. Scoring arms and feet. Dude, score! No, you're not getting a free basket of arms and feet. Rather, you take your hobby knife and you make little tiny light zigzags in the flat parts of the arms or whatever appendages or mechanical doodads or horrifying tentacles, whatever is on your model. Wherever they glue to the model, that's where you want to score them. It's also a good idea to score the connection on the other area of the model so that when both sides meet, they're both scored. It sounds weird, but scoring connection points helps create a much stronger bond between the glue and the plastic. This isn't as important with plastic glue because of how the compound in plastic glue melts the plastic anyway. Still, it can't hurt unless you cut yourself. That hurts. Don't cut yourself. Glue the parts together. All right, we're finally here. Regardless of the type of glue you're using, always use less than you think you need. If the part doesn't stick, you can always add more later. If you add too much, though, the glue will squish out of the sides of the model like a gross jelly donut, and we need to clean it up. Cleanup is definitely easier with plastic glue than super glue because, like I said before, super glue is just fantastic at sticking your fingers together. Seemingly, that's all it's good for sometimes. Super glue is a huge jerk that way. If glue does spill out, though, use one finger. Remember, don't glue your fingers together. One finger to wipe it off. Don't use paper towels or anything else like that. They'll leave behind a gross textured residue. You could also just let it dry and then scrape it off later on, but it's kind of difficult and really pretty messy. Oh, hey, remember dry fitting? That also helps you decide where to put the glue. In the past, I've added a big old dollop of glue onto a part that I swore was needed, only to realize nothing actually contacted it. Sadness ensued. Make sure to squeeze the model pretty tightly when you glue the pieces together or on it. That'll help avoid any ugly gaps and sort of add some stability. Plastic glue is actually more forgiving here if you want to go that route. If you use super glue, though, you can buy a pretty nifty little helper called a super glue accelerator or activator. You spray or drop that on the contact spot where the glue is, and it speeds up the drying process considerably. Just Google the term super glue accelerator or activator, and you can buy some. Brands don't matter. I don't have any, but it's just because I'm lazy. And now, time to glue that bad boy to the base, if the model has a base, that is. Same technique as before. Only difference here, it's actually okay to add more glue because it's going to get covered up soon anyway. Stay tuned. base that mini. In this example, I'm using Army Painter's pre-made rocks, but you can just cut and break apart some cork to get the same effect. It's really all these are. You can add rocks and stuff before anything else. Otherwise, in my opinion, it doesn't look that natural if you glue rocks and debris on top of sand and texture paint, because that's not really realistic. In real life, things will sort of develop around the rocks and items, unless it just happened. I don't recommend putting debris and rocks right next to a model's feet, because it'll be miserable trying to paint the feet later on when that stuff is in the way. You can use super glue for the rocks and big items, but you'll definitely want PVA glue / Elmer's glue for the sand and dirt. Anyways, after adding debris to the base, you can get creative, by the way. Like, you can add broken weapons, like old pieces of armor from your enemies that you don't need from other models. I like to dilute my PVA a little bit to make it smoother to spread around, but you don't have to. Use older cheap brushes for this. It'll mess them up pretty good, even if you rinse and clean them. Oh, and if you get glue on the side of the base, just wipe it off with your finger. Normally, I just dunk the whole base into a big jar of sand, but that was kind of too hard to film, so I decided to sprinkle the sand so you could get a better look. There's no wrong method here, just make sure the base is well coated and with whatever you want on it. Texture paints are a lot of fun, but they do cost money. Citadel has quite a few options, though. You can skip the sand step and just apply the stuff right on a base if you'd like. For me, though, I think it adds a nice touch to create multiple layers of different surfaces, so I'll often toss some texture paints on top of my sand and debris. Make sure your sand and debris are totally dry before doing this, otherwise it's a disaster. You can use a brush or a scooping tool for texture paints. I like using these metal sculpting tools for more control. Again, though, if you go the brush route, use an older and cheaper one you don't care about. It will get ruined. And that's all, folks. Now it's time to go ahead and paint that model. Once your model's assembled, it's based, it's ready to go. I'm going to cover that in another video because that is quite lengthy and a whole different set of skills. Thanks everybody for tuning in. I really appreciate it. If you have any suggestions, any questions, any comments, if you want to know what Drangus means, shoot me a comment below. Reach out. Happy to talk. So, until next time, good luck. Have fun. Hello and welcome to Atomic...
That's so loud.
That's how I talk. It's going in the video. Quiet on the set!